a new fancy file here that Heather gave me this morning. Thank you, Heather. And I put my sermon in it, so I just have to find it. Beautiful saints of God, for those of you that now know me well, you'll know that there's a central paradox to our faith as Christians. It's something that Jesus speaks about in the Gospel of John. He says, we are in this world, but we are not of this world. And this is a mystery. What does this mean to be in the world, but not be of the world? And our scriptures this morning, Jesus last week in the Gospel said to Peter, you mind the things of this world, not the things of God. And this morning in the letter of James, we read that we are called to be friends of God, not friends of the world. And so we sit again with this paradox, and I'd like to unpack some of that mystery for us here this morning to ruminate on together. What does it mean to be in the world but not of the world? What does it mean to be a friend of God, not a friend of the world? So the first thing we need to know is what is meant in Scripture when we refer to the world. We read in the Psalms that in wisdom God made the world. We read in Genesis that God created everything and saw that it was good. So clearly God is not talking about the whole created order, the oikomenos. And what we are celebrating this week in the season of creation is that world of God, the entire created order, all the universe, everything that has been made. So that's not the world that Scripture is talking about this morning. Rather, the world that Scripture is talking about, I would offer, is our society, is human society and the social construct that creates this society, that regulates the society. It is our social agreements with one another about what's valuable and what's not valuable, who's important and who's not important, what is status and what is not status. This is the world that Jesus has come to turn on its head. And we see it this morning again in the Gospels that the disciples are struggling to understand how Jesus is challenging our social order. And as I was reading through this, I was thinking about how revolutionary Jesus really is. And in fact, that is why he had to die, because he was such, the status quo was such a danger. He was such a danger to the status quo. And so we called here as disciples in our generation to try and understand what is it that God is asking us to be friends of. And what does it mean to be friends of God, to mind the things of God and not the things of the world? So I think the first thing that James speaks to us about this morning is James says the things of this world will lead to strife and disharmony. That when we attempt to live in the social construct that is all about honor and status and about shame and failure, that when we live in this type of construct, there will always be envy and bitterness and strife amongst us. Rather, we should seek to live the ways of God. To be a friend of God is to understand that the wisdom of God is foolishness to humanity. And what is this wisdom of God that Paul talks about, that we read about in Proverbs? It is basically the law of love. That we are called to live in love for God, ourselves, and one another. And when we are able to soak in, to ground our lives, to really be deepening in this relationship of love, then all our actions that come out of that, all the ways in which we see one another and see ourselves and deal with each other will be transformed. And so as I was thinking and reflecting on all of this, I was reminded about a story that I've shared with you before about the two wolves. Do you remember that story? Yeah, that inside every human being there's these two wolves. One is the good wolf that seeks everything that is pure and good and lovely and seeks to build up life, and the bad wolf that is full of bitterness and anger and seeks to destroy everything. And that inside of us, I think we have these two voices, these two friends, sitting on our shoulders maybe a little bit, and these voices that talk to us. Because what is a friend except somebody that you go to for advice? You seek out friends for company, you go to them when you have problems and you seek advice. And we have these two friends, the world and God, the good wolf and the bad wolf, speaking to us. And somehow, as we continue to grow and live and walk, these voices are the voices that we need to decide which friendship is the one that is more beneficial for us, which friendship is the one that we are choosing to follow. And as the story goes, the wolf that wins, or the friend that wins, is the one that you feed. It's the one that you spend more time with. And so we called in Scripture this morning to spend more time with God, to spend more time on the things of God. And this wisdom of God, this love of God, we read in the letter of James this morning, is gentle. It's full of gentleness. It's full of mercy. It's full of understanding. And so I guess the challenge to me, and I'm hoping the challenge to each of you as we go into this week, is to really pay attention to which of these voices are speaking to us in our circumstances. I wrote in the pew leaflet, this thing called life is just, it keeps running, it keeps going, it just doesn't stop. You can't get off. And so as things come at us, as we experience our relationships, our families, our workplace, and all the tasks that are set before us, as we go into this week, perhaps it's an opportunity to pay attention to which friendship are we encouraging, which friendship are we nurturing, and where is it that we might need God's mercy, gentleness, tenderness, and love to give us a solution to everything that we are facing. And so my prayer for each one of you and for myself as well is that as we go into this week, we will feed that good wolf and see the fruits of that in the relationships around us. In the name of